Hey everybody, this is Crystal Marks. I am the Executive Director of Seattle Out and Proud, or Seattle Pride, and I am here today to do a book review with some fabulous content. It's red, white, and royal blue. It's really important for Seattle Pride, especially that we are highlighting books that feature members of our community, and this is one of them. This is a pretty good book, in my opinion. Some criticism, some good things, some bad things. But before we get into it, I'm going to toss it over to my co-host.
Hi, I'm Micah Anderson. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Youth Advisory Board with the Museum of Pop Culture.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Micah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, before we get started on what we liked, didn't like, how we see our community show up in the book, would you mind giving us just kind of a brief overview of what red, white, and royal blue is all about?
Yeah, sure. So it's these two characters, both guys. Alex, who is the son of the now president of the United States, or in the book, the now president, not our current president, and Prince Henry, who is Prince in the UK. It kind of starts out as Alex will push Henry into a wedding cake, and then an Instagram friendship will kind of be forged as damage control. And then after that, it kind of becomes more like a romantic flame, and then it just gets more intense and becomes into a relationship. But not without some really good quality kind of coming out and questioning of sexuality.
I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I would say as much as I loved like that forced like PR friendship thing, I found myself getting really annoyed, like, really, you're going to force someone to do this just to save like a little snafu that happened? But yeah. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on how, and we can make this very much a discussion, what are your thoughts on how the LGBTQIA plus community is presented in this book?
Well, honestly, for the main characters anyways, I wasn't especially thrilled with it. I found that both Alex and Prince Henry were kind of portrayed as the gay male stereotype of everything has to be really over dramatic and kind of, I don't know, I'd say like over dramatic and campy. That's have it written down here. Yeah, over dramatic, theatrical, and really campy is what I wrote down as adjectives to describe the way that the author portrays the main characters. I thought it was interesting that the author actually, who is a lesbian, decided to portray two gay male characters, or one gay and one bisexual male characters. I don't know, it just felt a little strange to me that the author would maybe choose to not represent themselves or use their own personal experience in the writing of this book.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What do you think it does when members of the LGBTQ community see a main character portrayed in more of a campy light as opposed to the full breadth of a human?
Right. I think that in the context of this book, it's more considered to be okay because it is like, it's a romantic comedy, you know, it's definitely supposed to be funny. It's not intended to be serious 100% of the time. I do think that for young people kind of coming out and questioning, though, it may almost force them, in a sense, to feel like they have to be one certain type of way to be validated as a gay person. Yeah.
I think that's good. Yeah. I think there was definitely an issue with that. Very much like the Instagram, like the text speak back and forth between the two main characters was like, okay, but there's more to what, you know, more to ways to communicate than that. Something I liked about the way that LGBTQ characters were portrayed in this book was the political activism side. Like there was, I think our community really has a drive for that when we have, there's so many civil rights battles that were fought, and the need to engage on that was really good. And so kind of showing like how you can wear both hats. You can be a gay or bisexual or lesbian human being and or anything else and still engage in politics and be effective and not have that be a stain on your, in this case, your mother's presidency. I liked that message a whole lot.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like it in that sense, it does portray that your identity is not your career. And I really appreciated that because I feel like oftentimes gay people or many other people are tokenized in the workplace, and I feel like that is something that needs to change. And this book definitely is kind of it's a great example of what really should be happening as opposed to what is happening.
Yeah, I like that. Well, kind of piggybacking on that, why is diversity in our literature so important? So there's diversity in many terms, like in how people are portrayed. The stereotypes are not always the case, but in this case, Alex, the main character, um, his mother is a Latino woman. So, or sorry, his father is Latino man, and the mother is a white woman. And so Alex is himself identifying in both worlds. What role do you see that playing in young adult literature?
Well, I think that it's good. I obviously can only speak to my experience as a clearly very white male. Um, but I think that it's very necessary for kind of mixed people and people of color to be shown in young adult literature because I don't know, I personally feel like in a lot of the books I've read and a lot of the movies based on books that I've seen, it's just very whitewashed, especially in young adult literature. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of people of color represented in the literature and the movies. Um, but when more people of color are represented, it kind of just it holds space in the community, like a I don't know, I say a fan base community, because people, they just feel welcome. They don't feel like they're being alienated because of their sexual orientation or the color of their skin, which is obviously something we should really strive for as a community and also as an entire world.
I agree with that. I thought it was interesting that the author chose to pair Alex with Henry, who comes from very, very white England. And while Alex himself is also struggling to figure out who he is and coming to terms with what he wants to do with his future, um, what did you think of that juxtaposition of having a white Prince of England and a half Latino, half white, basically Prince of the U.S. If you think of it in terms of president and their kids? Did you see kind of any play on that in the book, or would you have liked to see more?
I think that I personally would have liked to see a little bit more, but at the same time, I find that because the author, isn't a person of color, if I remember reading that right in the bio, I think that it would have been kind of difficult for her to portray a whole lot of that because it's not in her personal experience. And I feel like uh, coming from the standpoint of an English student, the best kind of books to read are the ones that have things based off of personal experience. So while I think it would have been really cool to see more, I think that the author was right in the amount that she did portray it.
Yep, I'll agree with you there too. I've read a few books, and maybe you have as well, where people try to kind of reach a little bit beyond, and maybe their intentions are good, but it hits the wrong note and it gives a wrong representation, I think, of not only robbing the voice of an entire community, but giving the wrong perspective to maybe it's a white person writing on, this is how I feel as a black person in a book. Well, that can't possibly be accurate unless you are having someone from that community writing it for you.
Right. I definitely agree. I've seen examples of that, kind of like straight people writing for gay people in the terms of coming out or writing for transgender people like myself. Um, I read this book recently. I cannot remember for the life of me what it was called, but it was about this transgender boy who was coming out to his family, and the author was very cisgender, heterosexual, and white, and it just kind of it was very off-putting to like read what this author wrote because it was not entirely well, it wasn't at all true. It was very much so an over-exaggerated child comes out to the parents kick the child out, and while it is some people's experience, it's definitely not all people's experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I think it would be interesting if there was a way for us to provide feedback to authors when they do that, just like, hey, thanks so much for wanting to cover the topic, but maybe encourage, maybe trans authors that are out there, reach out and encourage their work and encourage them in their continual development and highlight that instead, and maybe leave a particular subject matter to someone who's an expert would be maybe better received.
Yeah, or even maybe like collaborating with authors in kind of sensitive subjects like that. I know that in movies and TV shows, they will often who it is. I can't remember the name of the title, but it's oh gosh, cultural. No, I don't know the name of the title. Oh no, I do. Cultural consultant. Um, it's where kind of somebody who is very well in tune with that culture and is a part of that culture will be consulted upon for their experience and knowledge about that. So I think that in having that with this book, it probably would have just made the entire overall book feel a lot more authentic and realistic to the real
Mm, that's a good point. And I didn't know that there were cultural consultants. I didn't know that was a thing. I'm really glad it is. I mean, especially for people to be paid for the labor that they're putting in to make your work, and your on the broad term, your work as a white cisgendered writer, you know, that much more relevant and impactful. I think that's definitely needed. Um, we'll take it down a notch and something a little bit more lighthearted and about the book before we dive back in on one more like heavy subject topic. But and it's a spoiler alert, so if no one has read this wonderful book, you might want to like step away for a second. But at the beginning of the book, Alex and Henry, as you touched on in your description, Alex and Henry were enemies. They did not get along well, hence the cake toppling over incident. And then they slowly became friends, and then they became lovers. Um, what does their relation? How about that? Does that work so well for them in their relationship, and how do they really balance each other out? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's kind of funny the way that they balance each other out. You know, one seems so kind of, you know,